Hi, and welcome to video number 8 of our music education series. This time we'll be talking through the connecting section of the Georgia Standards for middle schoolers. So let's get going. In the 6th grade for the connecting section, the very first subpoint that we have is comparing two art forms and summarizing their common characteristics. For example, this would be between a musical art and another type of performance art. So visual art or literary art are the examples given, because those are kind of the main categories. So a great way to do this would be to take an exemplary piece from each of those art forms. So in one of my lesson plans that I recently wrote, I compared two impressionist pieces. So a visual painting that was from that time period, and then a piece by Debussy. Now, Debussy did not actually like to be called an impressionist, but he is widely thought of as impressionist, and so that's what I went with for the comparison. Giving students a specific example to look at and hear while they're thinking about the art forms is really helpful, because if you just ask students to compare impressionist pieces between visual art and listening, it will be much harder for them to come up with things to say, adjectives to describe how they feel, that kind of thing. They need something to look at and to hear to kind of get those thoughts going in their heads. The second subpoint is to recognize the interrelated principles between music and other subject areas. So this does not have to be connected to the arts at all. An easy example would be between music and math. If students were to take principles in math and principles in music theory and music notation, they would quickly see a lot of similarities, because there's counting, there's structure, there is addition and subtraction and multiplication. And these show up in a lot of ways in music, and it's things that they learned in 3rd grade, a lot of, for mathematics. Seeing these interrelated principles is really helpful for students, because we want them to be well-rounded academic students and people. So if they're able to see that actually between subject matters there's a lot of connection, then they will have more of a drive to learn well and connect things. This will serve them super well when they are in the workplace and they know that one concept that they understand from school or from a previous experience is actually super helpful for a later concept in maybe a completely different area or a different job. People build up experiences and memories, and this is what helps them to succeed in later ventures. So it's really important that students connect interrelated principles between music and other subject areas. Now, math was just an example, but there could be lots of different examples. So that's something that would be good to think through for each classroom. Think about what your students excel at, what they do well with, and try to connect that. So if you have students that are really good at science, it would be awesome to tie in anything that could be related to science and music. Now, science is a hard one, but it absolutely can be done. Just like in music, there is structure and certain compositional things about music that make it the case. There are those things in the world of science as well. So there are things about physics and sound waves, all of that kind of thing can be tied into the music classroom. So give it some thought. The next one is describe various career paths in music. So this one is very important, because a lot of students in middle school might think that there are only 2 paths for anyone who's studying music or goes on to study music in college or after high school. And while there are 2 main paths, being teaching and performing in some capacity, that is not only, those are not the only options. And so students should be made aware of how many different options there are. Even within those seemingly limited options, there's a lot of variety. So you could be an elementary school teacher or an orchestra teacher, or you could go on in school and get your PhD and teach at a college. You can be a private instructor, you can teach in school. And then for performing, there are countless ways that you can be a music performer full-time. That doesn't necessarily just mean scoring gigs at Carnegie Hall or being on Taylor Swift's backup team. So it's good for students to think through this so that even if they're not considering this career path, they at least have an accurate representation of what it means to be a musician professionally. It's good exposure for students to learn about another job and learn about jobs that maybe their friends will have one day, and it's good for them to consider if it could be a possibility for them. I think the most important thing with music is that there are so many random jobs that pop up out of nowhere with specific connections, and you can end up using your music knowledge and or degree if you go on in ways you never expected. And that has been really cool to watch for some of my musician friends who have not been sure what they wanted to end up doing and something super random showed up. So it's hard to tell students that because sometimes there are things that you can't count on or very unique to one location or one program, but it is important. In the 7th grade, connecting music, the very first subpoint is compare the way a musical work and other art forms transform related subject matter into art. So for example, how world events and natural disasters can inspire works of art. So this is a really cool connection for students to make. It seems especially relevant since we just had a pandemic. So students need to see how everyday realities and hard things that they may experience or see around them are part of what keeps art moving forward. It's easy to see that maybe in history or understand that theoretically as a student, that certain things inspire art or are the reason that specific music was created, but it should be very inspiring to students to see that happening in their reality, in a world that they live in and experiences that they have had. That can be super small. It could be a storm in the neighborhood that someone wrote a song about, or it could be huge, like COVID-19 and all the art that has produced. So that's a really important thing for 7th graders to start digesting and discussing in class. So the next subpoint in 7th grade is discussing the interrelated principles between music and other subject areas. So that was touched on a little bit in 6th grade, but in 7th grade, we want students to be able to articulate what is happening there, what the connection is, and understand exactly how to piece it all together. And same for exploring and comparing career paths in music. We want students to put themselves in those shoes. Imagine what it would be like to be a conductor. Imagine what it would be like to be someone that teaches conducting. There are so many random options, and students can think through those and discuss and contrast, and that will be really good for them. All of those 7th grade principles are the same for the 8th graders. So as you build your program, you'll want to think about how you can amp those up even more in 8th grade, but the same general ideas are at play. So thank you for watching video number 8.